Welcome to the show. It's Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com. I'm Sean Stiers. I am in Fort Worth, Texas, downtown Fort Worth, Texas, as a matter of fact. And I am joined today by Jesse Stiers. Why am I in Fort Worth, Texas? Because Notre Dame women's basketball is in the Sweet 16 tomorrow. The game tips off at 2:30 Eastern Time on the Notre Dame Radio Network, of course, including Sports Radio, WSBT. How are you today, Jesse?
I'm doing pretty good. There is some inclement weather approaching Cleveland that I'm not too happy about. A lot of rain. We're on like a tornado warning. A lot of bad weather coming in. I'm glad you brought up Fort Worth, Texas, though. Have you had the opportunity to get any barbecue yet?
I got like 4 blocks from the hotel. There is a barbecue place. Funny story. Funny you should mention that, actually. We hadn't planned this. So I got it this afternoon, but I'm saving it for my dinner tonight. So I walk there, I get it, I order the 2 meat, ribs, and brisket. I get it back to my hotel, or I get back to my hotel room, I open the bag, and there are only ribs. There's no brisket in there. So fortunately, again, it's only 4 blocks away, but I called, talked to the manager, told him what's up. I go back and he refunds me. So I didn't have to pay for any of it, which is nice because they screwed up.
So it's your lucky day.
Yeah. So we'll see. I've sampled a little bit. It tasted pretty solid. I would say not as good as when I was in Dallas a few weeks back and I went out and got barbecue, but good enough. It's Texas barbecue, so any barbecue is going to be good here. So
you're very fortunate. I was messing around on social media and I, for some reason, saw something about the barbecue being good in Fort Worth. And I was like, well, there's only one person I need to ask.
Yes. We're not far from the stockyards and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, we're downtown. And producer Ty is going in on Kansas City barbecue. Funny, he's a Missouri guy, of course. I have to say, I'm actually more partial to Texas barbecue than Kansas City barbecue.
Really?
Probably controversial, considering I'm from Kansas. But I like the they use a little bit more of like the dry rub in Texas than they do in Kansas City, which is kind of the style that I make when I make barbecue at home. So that means you get a little bit more of like the burnt end, kind of
the flavorful crust.
Yes, the flavorful crust. That's a great way to put it. So, yeah, I'm down. It's barbecue. I'm, one way or another.
I will say though, Kansas City Joe barbecue.
It is
very good barbecue.
It is good. Can't go wrong.
Every time we pass through, I'm not mad about when we have to stop there.
I bet you're not. That's absolutely right. There and Ponak's, our favorite Mexican joint in Kansas City as well. That's and they're not too far from each other, actually. They're right around the same exit, actually. Joe's Kansas City Barbecue and Ponak's Mexican in Kansas City. Well, we've got a lot to get to today. We are going to cover some Notre Dame football. In our first segment of the show, we've got some comments from Notre Dame quarterbacks coach Gino Guidugli. You're going to hear him talk about CJ Carr and the backup guys as well, Blake Hebert, as well as Noah Grubbs. And we've got a little bonus Notre Dame women's basketball mailbag action in the second hour of the show. I'm pretty excited about that, previewing tomorrow's game. It was practice day today in Fort Worth at Dickies Arena, and press conference day and all that kind of good stuff as well. So we'll talk about the women's game in the second segment, but let's just jump right into some Notre Dame football because, again, it is spring football going on. And so we've got plenty of opportunities so far to talk with different coaches and players and stuff like that. And you'll hear from CJ Carr in rapid fire in hour number 2. But we're going to hear from the quarterback's coach, Gino Guidugli, first. And Gino was asked about CJ Carr's ability to make checks at the line of scrimmage and the comfort level that he has for someone with his relative inexperience. He's only got 1 year as a starting quarterback. So here's what Gino Guidugli said about that.
Has a big picture perspective on the game, and just I've been around some really good ones, and just his ability to piece things together of what's a good play versus a bad play is just unique. And for him just to be going into a redshirt sophomore year, unbelievable. So we'll count on him to do a lot of that stuff. He's already doing some of that in spring ball, and more times than not, he's putting us in a really good situation and makes us so much better as an offense when you got a guy out there that can just run the show.
I mean, he had that in year 1 as a starting quarterback, last year as a redshirt freshman, and now he goes into essentially his redshirt sophomore year. So what do you think it looks like in year 2, or anything that stand out there from what Gino said?
Yeah, I think the first thing that stood out is, it sounds like CJ Carr just has a processor, a football processor at the line of scrimmage where he can quickly put the puzzle together of what needs to happen. And that's obviously, I think the hardest part about being a quarterback, especially a young quarterback in college football. So that's really awesome to hear. What I think that looks like in year 2, I think in year 2, you're going to have to probably see a little bit more of that, to be honest with you. CJ Carr at the line of scrimmage, maybe checking in and out of a play depending on what's being shown. I just feel like, personally, with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love being gone, CJ Carr is going to have to do more in the passing game next season.
Don't jump the gun yet, because that's coming up in our next soundbite from Gino Guidugli. No Love, no Price. And I just feel like when you're able to come in with no experience like CJ Carr had, there were only a handful of times last season where it really seemed sped up, and he's talked about it before, maybe there was analysis or paralysis by analysis, information overload, I guess maybe is the better way to put it. He over prepared, and we've talked about the USC game, and that was the one where he really seemed like not seeing ghosts, but there were things that I think he was anticipating that he was going to see that he didn't see, and that kind of threw him off a little bit. Obviously, they were still able to win that game, and we went through a while back all of his interceptions. Not that he had that many interceptions, and throwing over the middle, a little bit late over the middle on the pass to Jadarian Price against Texas A&M, and just there really, to me, weren't a lot of common threads, common ties to this is why CJ Carr had this interception, or this is why things went wrong. The bottom line is he's able to see things so well pre-snap, and he's able to diagnose so well once the play begins that it just feels like it just opens the door for so many other possibilities going into year 2 as a starting quarterback now for him.
Yeah, and that he's someone who's all football, and that's why he's so good about this. This comes from, hours of studying the playbook, hours of studying your film, hours of studying the opponent film, and it's just you keep building and building and building, and he's just going to continue to take that. He just has so much overall knowledge of football for how young he is, and I think that's what is translating to the field. And like you said, it's not his mistakes don't come because he's making a bad read. It's oftentimes his competitive spirit or nature. He's trying to extend plays and make a play kind of out of nothing. Not nothing, but
sometimes out of nothing.
But that's way better than thinking you got, man to man, and all of a sudden the safety comes over the top and gets an interception.
Exactly. It's not like he's confused by something, I don't want to say simple, but
schematically.
He's not confused by it very much. Again, having gone through the 6 interceptions that he threw the 2 down in the red zone. But again, it's like you're pressured, and one was fourth down, so you've got to throw the ball. What else are you going to do? And, like there's another one where it's 3rd down, and it's like, okay, let's just throw this ball out of bounds and live to play another play. And, maybe either we go for it on 4th down or we kick our field goal or whatever it happens to be. They were deep red zone, so the odds were that they were going to go for it again. But it's just stuff like that, just sort of, like live to play another play for the most part. And yeah, and his Tamiza Pizapu, I don't know, I have no idea what that is in the YouTube chat. That's quite a handle. But he says he's the son and grandson of coaches, which I think is pretty well documented at this point. I'm sure he got everything after every game that he's played. Yeah, I mean, he got an education at an early age. There's a reason he's advanced as he is. There's no doubt about that. So now to what you were starting to get to, what Carr won't have this season is either Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price in the backfield. So how could that potentially impact the kind of looks that CJ Carr gets at the line of scrimmage? Here's what Gino Guidugli said about that aspect.
No, like last year going in, like we had pretty good wideouts. Like Malachi Fields and Will Pauling are pretty good. Jordan Faison's pretty good. And people still wanted to load the box on us to stop the run. That was always the key. So, like, the only thing they could do differently is now decide that they're going to play too high, which we saw very few shots of last year. It's just like you think defenses are built to stop the run all the time. So I don't know how much differently they'll give us looks. And I think we're going to have really good backs, and we've got a really good offensive line that's well coached. Mm-hmm. Like I think teams are still have to prepare for us the same way and come out to stop the run first.
So what do you think? Like game 1, Wisconsin, do you think that's Wisconsin's game plan? I think
I'm a little surprised by that answer from Gino. Maybe
he's just saying it as a like a
decoy, not giving away the answer, saying they're concerned about it. I mean, all of their running backs are out right now in spring ball, basically. I mean, I realize I think Aeneas is in that red jersey, so he's non-contact, but I don't know how you can get on the mic and say, we're losing 2 first-round running backs, but we think defenses are going to play us the same way. It's just not how it's going to go. I think you are going to see a bit more of the too high, and you're going to see teams actually tempting or daring Notre Dame to kind of run the ball a little bit more this year. And I think CJ Carr might have to be a little bit patient early on and take some of that more middle of the field, underneath intermediate route stuff, and not try to hit the home run deep ball super early in the season.
And again, that's an area of improvement for him. And not that he was always just out there dropping bombs all day long, but again, they avoided the middle of the field as much as possible. Like going back to Texas A&M with the interception to Jadarian Price, a little bit hesitant, and then late with the throw, and it ends up being an overthrow, and and it turns into an interception. But we didn't see them throwing to the middle of the field a lot. And so if the safeties, if they're playing more too deep stuff, I think you're right. Like personally, I think that's what, especially Wisconsin is going to come out in, and they're going to say, okay, you don't have Love and Price. You're going to have to show us that you can run the ball. And they're going to see if CJ Carr can be patient enough to, dink and dunk a little bit. And,
if you're Wisconsin, the last thing you want is a track meet in Lambeau Field and you're down 28-0, maybe going into halftime, because you're just not going to catch up. You're not built to catch up, especially with what Notre Dame is going to have in the secondary and along, on the rest of the defense. So they're going to dare them. They're going to want them to slow it down, run the ball, not turn this into a track meet and make it, I'm not trying to get ahead of myself, for lack of better terms here, a respectable game. Because again, the last thing Wisconsin wants to do is get boat raced in Lambeau Field.
At Lambeau Field, game 1, like the other side of this, it is Luke Fickell and Marcus Freeman, and Gino. Like when you look at Notre Dame staff, Denbrock, Freeman, Guidugli, Mickens. Mickens is gone. I'm trying to think. Mike Brown. Like these are all guys who have worked for Luke Fickell before. and the last thing he wants is a whitewashing game one at Lambeau Field with all these guys. So it's going to be really it's interesting, but again, I think you really have no choice because you don't have now. We've all seen what Aeneas Williams can do, and to some extent they have as well. But when you don't have those ultra dynamic, high first round, probably high to mid second round type running backs in your backfield anymore, as a defensive coordinator, as a head coach on the other side, especially when you have an entire offseason to prepare, you're going to give them some looks that you hope that they're not ready to see, and you're going to make them say, prove you can run the ball and prove you can take what we give you with the defense. The other aspect of CJ Carr's game, and I know this kind of worries
gets
some
people fired up.
It does. It really does.
It's a touchy subject with a lot of people.
Maybe as much as anything when it comes to CJ Carr, and that is running the football. He's not Riley Leonard, but here's Gino Guidugli talked a little bit about what he needs to see from CJ Carr as a runner of the football in year two.
Such a good job in the run-pass game. There were very limited opportunities, but when he scrambled last year, I thought he was pretty good. Now, the thing that I've encouraged him to do is, we need to slide and get down because there are some cumbersome plays at the end of some of his scrambles where he's taking unnecessary shots that we just need to go ahead and get on down.
So when you consider what's behind him at quarterback, Jesse, two completely inexperienced guys who there's a lot of talent there, but, they're not to the same level of CJ Carr, just in terms of, what's between the ears, the gray matter in terms of their own development going into year two for Hebert, year one for Noah Grubbs. And we're going to hear Guidugli talk specifically about them. But, running of the foot, it seems like what Gino said there is pretty vital when you consider the drop off from the starter to the backup quarterback, whoever it ends up being.
Yeah, it sounds like there's at least a concerted effort or conversation going on of, hey, let's kind of, address the elephant in the room here of if you get hurt, where does that put the rest of the team type situation? And so, yes, there's going to be plays where you can, design plays where he's going to run the ball and touch the ball, and I think that those should be situational. But there's got to be other times where he's just got to be aware of, I don't need to take a shot just to take a shot or to gain maybe a yard, So I think that his athleticism is sneaky. I think that you can use him situationally as you kind of lull teams to sleep through the motion throughout the game. And he can show up in some big time, maybe potentially short yardage, goal line type situations where, it's almost like when Peyton Manning ran in for a touchdown unblocked or untouched. It's just, you just have everyone so hypnotized and fooled that it's well executed and designed. And I think that's what they'll do with them. They're not just going to say, okay, here's QB, power, or QB, ISO many times throughout the game or the season.
I mean, he only had 41 carries last year, and 12 of them were sacks because, as you remember, in college, your sacks count against your rushing totals and your rushing numbers and all that stuff. So that's only 29 designed runs, and obviously not all of the runs were actual design. Some of them were scrambles. So it really only comes out to a couple times per game that he's even carrying the football. So it's just, as Guidugli said, it's just the smart play. You've just got to be smart and not take unnecessary contact and get down. You got a first down or you got your 3 or 4 yards, whatever it happens to be. Get down, go head, or not head first. Don't go head first, go feet first. Get down and don't take shots that you don't need to take. It's just that simple. I don't know. Do you think they work on that? Do you have him do that? Okay, take off running, now get into your baseball slide.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I think if it's something that you want them to do, it's just another thing that you have to practice. If you're gonna ask CJ Carr to slide and he's never slid before in practice or a game, you can't expect it to go well. So I would hope so, but I would also think that he's a natural enough athlete that he could just slide.
You would think. And again, the instinct and those kind of things. Like even in high school, not every play is going to go perfectly. So there are going to be times where he had to have done it. Robert wants to know, will Notre Dame get Fickle fired if the game is a blowout? I mean, I don't think they're going to fire him as they walk out of Lambeau Field, but I think he's going into this season, to some extent on a hot seat. So I think the seat will get a heck of a lot warmer. But at the same time, look at the two programs and what the expectations are right now. Notre Dame is a program going into the season with expectations of getting to the college football playoffs and competing for a national championship. Wisconsin is still in a situation where they're just trying to get a little bit above 500, get to a bowl game, that kind of thing. So big difference. One game is not going to make or break it, but Wisconsin's starting off with a pretty high degree of difficulty in their season opener. So Gino Guidugli also asked about the number one challenge for the two young guys, Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert. And of course, Grubbs is a freshman early enrollee, and Hebert in his second spring after enrolling early last year, going into his second year at Notre Dame. So what's the top challenge? What does he need from the two young quarterbacks this spring?
Well, I think both those guys just for Blake, like last year, spring ball, he's here, but we're in a three quarterback, trying to figure out who the guy is. Blake didn't get a whole lot of reps last spring. And then you go to fall, and Blake ends up being the scout team quarterback. So it's almost like Blake's coming in just like Noah, almost as a true freshman in terms of him being in there and repping with the offense. And, my expectation for them is the spring is like, let's get through spring ball. I want you guys to understand, defensively, are they in man or zone in the pre-snap? I want you to be able to adjust our protection schemes, and I want you to be able to execute our offense. And the things CJ is doing, like, we're not going to put that on your shoulders yet. Like, we got to get a base fundamental understanding of our offense and see you guys go execute that before we get into changing plays and tapping plays out and all the things that eventually come with responsibility to be the quarterback of this offense.
All right, I'll let you I'll let you give your thoughts to that first, then I've got a question that I'm going to ask you after that.
I thought that was a little bit surprising that he basically said, Hebert, yeah, he was here last year, but we had a 3-man competition, and then in the fall, he pretty much ran scout. So in terms of, running the actual Notre Dame offense, he was very limited. To me, it's kind of like he kind of set the stage of, these guys are kind of equal going into this. So don't be surprised either way type of situation. And if you're Noah Grubbs, you kind of have to be, through the roof excited because you really didn't miss much. And Hebert really didn't gain much in that year that he was here. So yeah, if you maximize the opportunity and you show more, because and this is just my belief, very limited, viewing, but I believe that Grubbs plays more like CJ Carr than Hebert does. And so in terms of arm talent, arm strength, being able to make certain passes, I think he plays more like CJ Carr. And so I would feel good if I'm him about my potential to slide into that number 2 spot really early on in his time at Notre Dame.
Well, and that's kind of, I said I was going to ask you a question because when you look at Hebert, really the biggest benefit that he got out of last year, he got a little bit, like he got to sit in those quarterback rooms and absorb film and, try to learn the playbook a little bit. But, again, it was a 3-man competition last spring. So that negated really the benefit of, to a pretty high degree of him enrolling early to begin with. And then the fact that he was the scout team quarterback. And this happens quite a bit. Like these are age-old conversations when you move, like the matriculation and the circle of life in a football program is guys move on. And, Kenny Minchie moved on. He went to the transfer portal, and now you've got to find another backup quarterback. And Minchie was the backup quarterback last year after narrowly missing, losing out in the quarterback competition with Carr. Did you need to find a way to give Hebert, some more of your own offense last year? Or, were you just banking on, well, once the spring rolls around, he's going to get next spring, this spring right now, thinking about this last year, he'll get plenty of opportunities. And then on top of that, are you also thinking, because you didn't know exactly what was going to happen with Teddy Gerard at the time, but are you thinking, well, we have Noah Grubbs coming in. So you're thinking, maybe he, ends up being the guy anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities. I think in that scenario that you just talked about, it is a little not concerning, but it's like the fact that Hebert really hasn't had much exposure is a little head scratching at the end of the day. But you had to have someone who was going to run your scout team. And really, that's kind of praise within itself, especially for someone that's a freshman. Because running scout team quarterback, like you are still trying to give the defense, a really good look. And so it's just a little bit confusing that he didn't get as much exposure to, running the actual reins of the offense.
Right.
And it kind of washed out a whole season. And now you have so yeah, it's like, were they banking on Grubbs being someone?
But I mean, it's, like you've been in those practices, it's hard during the season when you've got two quarterbacks because you're trying to prepare week to week for an opponent. So the bulk of your reps are going to go to the number one. Whatever's left are going to go to the number two. It's hard to get those third string guys any real reps, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, those third string guys are really going to get limited reps when it's all said and done. They're kind of like in a worst case scenario type situation. So yeah, it's like you said, the majority of the reps are going to first string, especially at a position like quarterback. Whatever is left is going to go to second string. And honestly, you'd be very, very fortunate as a third string quarterback to get any sort of reps during a practice or, a game week.
Yeah. Tamiza Pizapu says he'd be willing to bet a permaban that Hebert is number 2 after fall practice. I mean, I really don't know. A lot of it, I think,
is going to be Grubbs.
I think a lot of it's going to come down to how much Grubbs develops this spring and what kind of extra work that he's going to be able to do over the summer. I would not be shocked if it's Grubbs at all. And then a year from now, we're potentially having a conversation about another 2 to 3 man quarterback competition for the starting job, if things go to plan for CJ Carr this season. Okay, Notre Dame women's basketball in the Sweet 16 Friday against number 2 seed Vanderbilt in this Fort Worth 1 region. We're going to take a timeout. When we come back, we're going to answer some mailbag questions about Notre Dame women's basketball, some toward this weekend, some a little bit bigger picture, but that's what we're going to get into next. You're going to hear from CJ Carr in the second hour of the show as well. So we've still got a lot to come. You also hear from Hannah Hidalgo in the second hour of the show. Jam-packed show, as always. It's just, we're like smashing so many things in here, we don't know what to do.
Oozing content with all the content we're doing today.
That is exactly right. Love it in the middle of spring when we've got content to ooze. So we will do that when we return. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. The old mute button. Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com continues. I'm Sean Stiers, along with Jesse Stiers. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. You can see my fancy hotel room door behind me here in the hotel in downtown Fort Worth as Notre Dame gets set to take on Vanderbilt in the Sweet 16, fifth straight Sweet 16 for Notre Dame. And I don't know about you, Jesse, but I think I might be more excited for this one than any of the last four. How about you? You're muted.
I would have to agree with you just because of everything that kind of had to come together in the adversities that the team had to go through throughout the season to get here. This was definitely the hardest one. But I really like their matchup to get to the Elite Eight as well. So that also, plays into, I know Vanderbilt has a National Player of the Year finalist, 4 losses, plays in the SEC, all of that stuff. I just think that if there were a team that Notre Dame could, I would say upset because they are the underdog, this would be a team I feel good about. And I saw something today that per ESPN, Notre Dame has the best chance of the underdogs to make an upset.
Yeah, of all the underdogs in this Sweet 16, Notre Dame, according to ESPN's BPI, they have the best chance of an upset this weekend. So take what you will, I guess. Before we get into some of these mailbag questions, it's pronounced Pizapu. Tamiza Pizapu. Okay. In the chat. And there's always one. Michael says, stick to football, knuckleheads. We'll be coming back to football. But again, there's only one March, right? And we're in the middle of March Madness, Notre Dame women's basketball. I do the games, and the games are here on this station. So feels like a logical 1 + 1 = 2. So with that said, we took some mailbag questions in the Champions Lounge at IrishBreakdown.com. Double R 2.0. Keys to victory. Who are the players from Vandy to look for? I'm not going to get into specific keys to the game because I've got too much, background knowledge that is not commonly shared background knowledge. But, Michaela Blakes is the biggest name to know for Vanderbilt. Leading the nation in scoring. She is a Naismith Player of the Year, National Player of the Year finalist. She averages 27 points a game. She's had 13 games of 30-plus points this season. She's topped 40 twice this season, and she had a pair of 50-point games last year. They've got a freshman point guard named Aubrey Galvin, who is the SEC Freshman of the Year. She's their second leading scorer, and she dishes out 5.7 assists per game. And she actually works out with Jewel Lloyd, according to the Vanderbilt notes, which I think is interesting. Jewel, of course, a Notre Dame alum. And then Justin Passat, she's 6'4", but she is not your typical 6'4" player. She's much more a perimeter player, and she's hit 95 3-pointers this season. And that's another thing for Vanderbilt. They average over 9.5 3-pointers per game. And then Sasha Washington is the rebounder. She actually has more offensive rebounds than defensive rebounds this season. Washington does. So I would say those are the 4 key players. And Vandy has a little bit more size than what Ohio State had on Monday. But I really, as we've talked about, Jesse, I feel like this is really similar in terms of what Notre Dame wants to do. As great as Michaela Blakes is, her ability to go left, I think, is a big question. So I think that's going to be something to watch for in Friday's game. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. Do you have anything to add?
No, you gave I have more to add, but you
Go
gave
ahead.
a really good, synopsis of the Vanderbilt basketball team. I think that the hardest part is their guards are going to have size. And I think you talked about it with Justine Passat. You got to get your hands up on a shooter like that on the perimeter. You got to be able to box out and not give them second chances. I still didn't like the amount of second chances that Ohio State got on the offensive glass. I know it's not going to, that's always kind of a thing for Notre Dame, but it gets more emphasized or heightened in a game like the Sweet 16. It becomes more of a kind of a critical factor. So in a game that could come down to a possession or two, I said it earlier in the week about the Ohio State game. Notre Dame has Hannah Hidalgo. Vanderbilt has their star player. It's a matter of, can Notre Dame get the most out of Cass Prosper,
right?
Ayanna Moore, KK Bransford coming off the bench. Vanderbilt's going to be a little bit deeper coming off the bench. I mean, but Notre Dame's accustomed to playing with their 6, 7 time. I mean, Sanchez plays, but it's usually like 10 minutes. So I would call it, predominantly a six-woman rotation. They just have to hunker down. You got to play good defense, and you have to, I think especially they have to push the perimeter. I think you have to force Vanderbilt to go inside, because I think they're going to want to shoot the ball. They're going to want to be a perimeter team. Right. While I'm not saying give them driving lanes, make them take more of those kind of intermediate shots instead of deeper kind of, more or less perimeter shots.
I think Notre Dame's got a good plan inside. And Vanderbilt is not going to be as good a defensive team either as Ohio State. I'm not saying they're a poor. I'm not saying they're a poor defensive team, but they're not as good a defensive.
And they're not going to be on ball pressing
State.
As much as Ohio
Correct.
State was.
Right. It's going to look a lot different. It's going to look a lot, and that's, so like some of the things that obviously Notre Dame was able to do against Ohio State won't be there. Like you want.
But I think that's really good for Notre Dame, because you have to, with a team that's not super deep and a team that doesn't have, I mean, realistically, it's Vanessa or Hannah bringing the ball up court. Sometimes you'll see Cass. I hold my breath when I see Cass bring the ball up court for some reason. But you don't have to. You don't have to exert as much energy. So Notre Dame, for a team that doesn't have a lot of depth on the bench, when Ohio State, I worried about that against Ohio State, because they were pressuring them nonstop. Like, it's getting the ball to half court was a chore half the time. And so with Vanderbilt, again, that bodes well for Notre Dame, that they don't have to press as hard or break that press with as much energy the entire game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, the poise they showed in that game, I think that's going to be, and I think one of the factors that you're going to look at is this is Ayanna Moore's old team. She just transferred from Vanderbilt. And so she'll be going, like, in the Sweet 16, she'll be going up against her old team for the first and only time in her career. So I think that's like how she handles that moment will be big. But I've been, again, as we've said, very impressed with the poise that she and the rest of the team have played with during the stretch, and especially Monday against all that pressure that they saw. Stray Dog of ND says, I've said this is Coach Ivey's best coaching job of her career. What do you think about the coaching job this year? I don't think there's a question, because again, it's just, you don't have a roster full of the McDonald's All-Americans and Gatorade State Players of the Year and stuff like that. You still have some good players and, a great player in Hannah Hidalgo, but it has taken some time for all of this to kind of morph and gel and come together. And I think one of the big keys that Niele Ivey and the rest of the team have started talking about a lot more is just how well this team meshes both on and off the court. And I like when you look at how things unraveled last year, I don't think you can overlook that as a factor.
Yeah, I think that this is definitely talent-wise not the deepest roster that Niele Ivey has had. And she has had to coach much harder and deal with injuries and kind of rotations and how to, there were points where it's like they were barely playing 5 players, and so then you get KK back and then you're mixing her in, and that unlocks and helps Hannah's game out. It is undoubtedly her best coaching season, to date. And I'll also say, for Niele, I feel like there's still more to go, I think, in her. I still see her as a coach that still kind of has more to unlock in terms of potential.
There
And I
is, but
think
I mean,
this
she's
is-
still a relatively young coach. You know,
Yeah.
this is only.
But I think that this is a season that's going to really help her moving forward, I think is what I'm saying, because I think it challenged her to think a little bit differently. It challenged her to coach games in a different way. It challenged her to, game plan and scheme in different ways and find ways to, win some games. But there's no doubt that, some of the best teams in the country, you don't have to have the most skill. It's a matter of, do you have each other's back for 40 minutes of basketball?
Look,
Can you trust each other?
Yeah.
Last year they couldn't trust each other. This year,
yeah.
I think everyone is willing to trust each other to make the right basketball play.
Yeah, and I think that there's some irony that they're in Fort Worth, Texas for this round, like when you talk about last year and this year and everything else. Renee is in the house throwing those 60-pound sacks.
He was so mad that you weren't here yesterday. He said he listened to the entire game while lugging around those 60-pound blocks.
Well, I hope that I could make that a little bit lighter load.
He's also traveling for the spring game, and we're on campus. He wants to hang out on campus. I said we could probably make that happen.
Sounds good. Okay, multiple questions from Chuck's Fupaw. Again, these questions come from the premium Champions Lounge at irishbreakdown.com, answering some Notre Dame women's basketball questions ahead of Friday's Sweet 16 game against Vanderbilt. What more can Hannah Hidalgo do to help the team win? I mean, what hasn't she done at this point?
I have one minor critique of her game.
Okay, well, I'll let you get the critique in a minute, but I'll just, remind you as I pull up my notes here, I want to make sure that I get these numbers right. When you look at what she has done to this point, in the first two NCAA tournament games last week, Hannah Hidalgo averaged 24.5 points, 11 rebounds, averaged 24.5 points in two games, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, 8 steals last week. So, I mean, I don't know what more you can do than that, but apparently Jessie has something, so go ahead.
Real minor. I just feel like sometimes when because she'll go through stretches where she's not making shots, and I get it, every, star player, and especially with kind of how Notre Dame is set up, they're going to take a lot of volume of shots. I would want her to be a little bit more situationally aware, because it feels like there's some times where the offense is just Hannah coming up and down the court and missing, 4 layups in a row. It's like, let's maybe slow down, pass the ball around a little bit, find a little bit better of a basketball play.
And she has to pick and choose. I would say this probably. She has to probably be cognizant of who the officials are calling the game.
Yeah.
Because we saw it last week, and I think we saw it in the ACC tournament at least once or twice. She's not getting some of those easy. She's not getting some of those calls that she's, used to getting. Yeah, it's a lot more sporadic in terms of she knows she needs to get herself to the free throw line, and she's obviously done a great job of that this season and throughout her career, but she's not getting those calls all the time. And so, I think you have to kind of pick and choose your spots probably and know, figure out how the game is being called, who's calling the game, and all that kind of stuff. Robert says, great job by Ivy and the coaching staff. Shame they are not deep. Again, that's not by choice. There were some other players who wanted to come to Notre Dame and who Notre Dame wanted, but because of the, undergrad transfer stuff, that didn't happen. But it is what it is at this point. There's no sense, getting caught up in any of that. Chuck's Football also says, seriously, who else needs to step up? What are some things they can do better? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the thing that you need to see happen is, you talked earlier in the week about how before the game it felt like there was a concerted effort from the coaching staff to get Cass Prosper locked in on her matchup, her tasks for the evening, and she played exceptionally well. I know that basketball is in her, but she can't have a game like she did in the ACC championship
semifinal against Duke. Yeah.
And play that way in the Sweet 16 when it's win or go home at this point in the season. everyone just needs to be mentally sharp and locked in. Like I hate to say it, but there's just really no room for error at this point. And I just saw you play a really dialed in game against a high end opponent. So a mark of a good player is bringing that consistently. So that's what I think that some of these players can do better is you got to consistently play that level of game if you want to beat a team like Vanderbilt and go on to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. But I would also say that she is at least last weekend, she was as locked in as we've seen her probably in a month and a half. Just the way she played last week. And to your point about the Duke game, it was obvious that I don't know if it wasn't locked in, but there was a different mentality in those games. And look, I think Ohio State is every bit as good as Duke. Again, like a little bit different size, but Cass is going to be called on as always to do a lot of different things, and they really need her tomorrow. And I guess I would say, again, Ayanna Moore is going up against her old team, and she hit 7 3-pointers last week, and she is their best, most consistent 3-point shooter throughout the course of this season. There have been games where it's like a 1 for 10 and, those kind of things, though. And obviously they can't have that kind of game against an opponent like Vanderbilt tomorrow. And, so otherwise they just need some balance. Against Fairfield, they had 3 players score in double figures. Against Ohio State, they had 5 score in double figures. If they get 2 to 3 other players beyond Hannah Hidalgo who are, around double figures, and they're able to stretch the court, stretch the floor a little bit, space the floor with some threes, I think it has a chance to be a really good day. Robert says, are you saying Olivia was a Cancer? Yes, that's what I've said it before. Hannah gets a lot of the external blame for that, like as if she's the one who chased the players off. Olivia Miles is a great player. She's shown that at TCU. But Hannah Hidalgo was the player of the year last year. And Olivia Miles didn't like basically, sharing the spotlight, let alone a large percentage of the spotlight going to Hannah Hidalgo instead of her. It is what it is. So I don't, there's not much more I can say about that.
It's just the harsh reality.
Yeah. And look, she did her thing. She made money this year. She kind of did her final year. They got the CBA approved for the WNBA. So,
I mean, both are in the same spot this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I've got to find there it is. My champion.
I hear a lot of clicks going on over there.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've done a show from the computer. I used to do it, the home computer. I used to do it all the time. We probably need to speed things up a little bit. Domer Grizz, does Hannah have particularly long arms for someone her size? Is that maybe the reason why she's so good at getting
I just
steals?
think she has great anticipation.
Yeah, great anticipation and lightning quick hands. And there's just so much instinct that goes into it. Because like when you look at some of those mid-court, open court type steals that she has, like the one last week against Ohio State, the one like she had against Louisville at the end of the game against Taj Roberts, those kind of things. It's just like she's just got such great anticipation. And I think that that is it. As Brandon says, you can't teach instincts. And she's been doing it for so long. And I think it's the combination of the quick hands and the instincts that she has. That's what it comes down to me. And she understands the angles, like she knows where the ball is going. Like there's just so much. There's just so much that you literally can't teach. Chris wants to know, now that we are part of the big girl part of the tournament, how many are we actually playing with? Who's coming off the bench that's not a walk-on or an ex-volleyball player? I mean, look, it will be pretty much what we saw last week, and that is KK Bransford and Gisela Sanchez off the bench. And the Sanchez aspect of it is going to be, can she, how do I want to say that? It comes down to defense, like how well she's able to play defense and what the matchups pose for her when she has to play defense. And, does Malaya Coles get into foul trouble? She did a couple of games ago. She was able to stay out of foul trouble the other day against Ohio State. And that's going to be big, And so I think that you're going to see a lot of KK Bransford off the bench again. And ultimately, so if it has to be 6 players, it'll be 6 players for Ivy. And it's just going to come down to how well Sanchez is able to hold up from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, I think Sanchez would be utilized guarding the perimeter, to be honest with you, with some of her size. She can guard inside out. But you would definitely see her if Malaya Coles gets into some foul trouble.
Right. Is that Noah? Noah wants to know if anyone's going to the game. I've seen Robin in the chat here earlier this week saying that they are going to the game. Robin must live down here in this area. Maybe not. Maybe traveling in. I don't know. Okay. Played like a champion, a.k.a. Scott S. Esquire. Did Hannah have tired legs in rounds 1 and 2? She looked a step slower than usual, and Niall sat her with 5 minutes to go in game 1. If she did, it makes all those plays she made even more astounding. I mean, there's Robin. Robin says they'll be there. I didn't notice this. She did get to sit the last 5 minutes because they were obviously taking care of Fairfield. Did you think she looked slow? I mean, they had 2 weeks off, in between games 1, the first game of the tournament and the ACC semifinals. I didn't think she looked a step slow.
Yeah, I didn't think that there was any difference in her, speed or looking tired or anything like that, especially like you said, they had a good amount of time off between the ACC championship in the first round. I'd be more concerned about, potentially this Vanderbilt game, but they've got some time. And man, she's young. She's, small and light. Like I'm sure if you asked her, she said she could probably play another game back to back. I don't think she's the type of player where I don't even think she ever gets tired. She's like an Energizer bunny. She gets more as she's going.
And look, there's a science to the whole thing in terms of, how much they're playing and what the rest looks like the next day. They all had the next day off. And, again, like between the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament, they had a huge gap off. They had a few days off where they got to get away for spring break. So maybe it just took her a little bit to kind of ramp back up. But like when you look at the level of competition, the kind of athletes that she was playing against Ohio State, maybe that could have made it look.
Yeah, Brandon just brought that up in the chat. Like that Cambridge, she was quick. She was going by everyone, and that's actually something I did notice during the game. I was like, man, you cannot get in front of this girl. As soon as she puts her head down and drives, towards the basket, she is very quick.
This is a follow-up question to the previous discussion about how Jelani Cambridge was the only Ohio State player who scored double digits going forward. Is there anything concerning for Notre Dame's defense about Jelani's 41-point offensive explosion? I would say no, because she scored 41, and for all intents and purposes, they won by 18 points because remember, it became a 10-point game after Hidalgo fouled out in like the last, 2 minutes of the game. And Cambridge just, chucked up a couple of late 3-pointers to get to that 41 points. Do you want Michaela Blake's going off for 40 or 50 points tomorrow? No, but just like Ohio State, you can live with a big game from one player as long as you're also not getting, even moderately big games from 2 or 3 other players. Like if that's their only offense and you're doing a sufficient job of shutting everybody else down, you can live with that. Now, if you beat Vanderbilt and take on UConn, it's going to be obviously a completely different story because there's so much depth there, but it's not a concern to me. Is it a concern to you?
No, it's not a concern to me. I honestly think that was kind of not a game plan, but I mean, you're going to live with Jelani putting up some points. It's just kind of like we talked about. You have to manage the rest of it. You can't allow someone else to get into the 15, 20-point area, because then that's when it'll get bad. And I mean, that's all the offense was really. It was just Jelani either driving in the hoop or getting a pull-up, kind of relatively close to the hoop. And a lot of it too is she drew fouls. She had a good amount of free throws as well. She could have had more, because I felt like for a while there she was splitting her free throws, going 1 and 2, 1 for 2 about every time. So, it's just, I think you live with the star player being a star player. It's what is everyone else around them doing.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of, he wants to know what matchups are concerning, and the matchups that I like. I would just say Passat, the 6'4" wing, like, in addition to Blake's, you can't have her going off for threes. And Notre Dame has done a really good job. Again, like we've talked about this, both teams last week were really good 3-point shooting teams, just like this team, Vanderbilt, tomorrow. And they've played a lot of 5-out type teams that can shoot threes. And Notre Dame has done a great job of defending it and, at the very least, limiting it. They haven't had a team go off. So I would say Passat as the counterpoint to Blake's, and then how they deal with Sasha Washington, who, again, has 158 offensive rebounds, 151 defensive rebounds this season. How are they able to counter her on the glass? I think that's going to be, especially if Notre Dame, is, like zone and some of those kind of things. Scott also wants to know pick and roll. What do you think about the pick and roll with Hidalgo? He says, have they told her to look for the roller on the pick and roll? They did a little bit of that against Fairfield. If so, why isn't this the go-to offensive play given the attention that Hidalgo?
I just don't think they have a big that is skilled enough around the hoop to consistently run some pick and roll. It's just a matter of what it is. I think.
And you didn't, Sanchez only played 5.5 minutes last week. And I think that she's the one who can do that a little bit better.
Yeah, I would actually prefer to see Sanchez in a pick and roll, just because she's a bit more athletic than Coles, a little bit taller, can finish around the rim a little bit better. But I mean, their primary, center is Coles, and she's just not as good of a finisher around the hoop as you'd like for someone to pick and roll. And she's not overly tall as well.
Yeah, exactly. Paul says, as we get deeper into the tournament, I believe Prosper, Coles, and Sanchez, the bigs, are the key to the further success. What do you think the key is this weekend? It just comes down to defense. Like, that's the biggest thing, is defense. And, like, to the depth thing, I didn't think about this, but I was thinking about this last weekend. I don't know if you noticed when you're watching a game on TV, but the breaks, the TV timeouts, are so much longer in the NCAA tournament. There's some natural extra built-in rest, and I think that it helps negate some of Notre Dame's lack of depth. So I think that it just comes down to, can they defend? Can they get out in transition and score that way? That's when they're most successful.
Yeah, I mean, good defense creates good offense for this team, especially for someone like Hannah Hidalgo, who steals the ball a lot, gets out in transition. And, back to the kind of the original question about Sanchez, Coles, and Prosper really being the bigs, Notre Dame's guards can match up with anyone in the country, because you have Hannah Hidalgo. Moore and DeJesus have a lot of experience, and they can play off Hannah really well. That's where they're always going to run into trouble, is when they go against teams with some legit bigs, or teams that have, multiple players that have height across the board. And so, I think that's where KK Bransford comes in. I know she's a little bit undersized, but she plays really tenacious on defense. And she's built, like, I wouldn't want to put my chest down and go into KK Bransford. She's built,
She can stand her ground, Yeah.
She plays like a power forward, even though she's probably more like a small forward. So I think as much as you can squeeze out of KK is just going to help across the board. How much she can provide defensively, especially because she can guard on the perimeter too. She's an on-ball defender. And then offensively too, it's just an added bonus. So looking forward to it.
And that's, the KK Prosper aspect of it, their versatility. They can defend, like, they can each defend and play so many different positions. And I think that makes them natural hard matchups for everybody. We've talked a lot about Bransford, but like that's I think a little bit of an X factor for Notre Dame. And when you look at the fact that, again, it's not the first time I've said this, but they've won 11 of 13 since Bransford came back, and one of the 2 losses was to Duke in the ACC semifinals. And
they probably should have won that game.
Yeah, and the other was not, just like I think Bransford's 3rd game when they got beaten by
Stanford.
Virginia. They got beaten by Virginia, and Virginia's in the Sweet 16 as well this weekend. So, those are the 2 losses. 2 teams that are also in the Sweet 16 this weekend. All right, we're way behind, so let's take our time out. When we come back, we will roll into rapid fire. That's right. Notre Dame in the Sweet 16 coming up, 2:30, 2:15 pregame, Friday afternoon, Notre Dame Radio Network, and here on Sports Radio WSBT. Rapid fire is next. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Every time I've come back from a break today, I've forgotten to hit the mute button. You probably saw my lips moving if you're watching in the YouTube show. But if you're listening on the radio, you just had a little bit more dead air there than usual. I'm Sean Stiers. It's hour 2 of Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat, IrishBreakdown.com. Does it look like I got a little sun on my face today? Like
it does. You have a little bit of redness.
Yeah, little Texas sun.
A little bit of that heat.
Outside, get my BBQ today. You would like it. There's a cigar lounge right down the street. It's so interesting because walking down the street, it was a little bit windy here today, and like you walk one block and you can smell all this, like barbecue smoke, and then you walk another block and it's like, where did all those cigars come from? There's a cigar lounge right there, and it's like an outdoor cigar lounge. They're sitting on the patio smoking cigars. Yeah.
That sounds pretty cool. What about the manure? Is the stench of manure in the air?
I have not smelled any manure, and we flew into the Fort Worth airport, and so we drove right by the stockyards area where they do, like the daily, cattle, they drive the cattle and all that stuff through downtown and the stockyards and all that. For being a cow town, I have not smelled any. It has not smelled like cow so far.
Well,
maybe the wind is just blowing in the right direction. Yeah. a lot of old train tracks and all that kind of stuff around here. So, all right, it is rapid fire time. So we've got some more Notre Dame football to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about in this rapid fire. I have no idea how much we're going to get to. Probably not very much. Not as much as we planned to anyway. Notre Dame's 2025 season, of course, ended early. That allowed Fighting Irish quarterback CJ Carr to do a little bit of extra film work in December. He looked at some different NFL quarterbacks and some specific things like taking snaps under center, quarterback footwork under center, and those kind of things. Here's what Carr says he took from that opportunity.
I think watching people play football at a really high level just watching it, not even really dissecting it, can really give you a lot of confidence. I watched a ton of Matthew Stafford, who was just unbelievable. I'd never watched him. I was a big Brady guy, big Rodgers guy last year, and I had in my mind like it was Brady, Rodgers, and someone was like, go turn on the Rams this year, and they were just the things they're doing schematically and the throws that he makes. It just was like, yeah, okay, that throw is possible to be made, and you're seeing that up and down the tape. And so now being able to see it and say, okay, well, this sucker's making it, like let's try it. Let's go out there and try it, see what it looks like, and let's get some under center in and see how can we manipulate a flat defender. And it was all great and a good. I think it's helped me for sure.
I have to say that of those three quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, I think Matthew Stafford is the one that I would see most of in CJ Carr. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I definitely, to answer your first question, I would agree that Matt Stafford, big arm, kind of gunslinger, take risks type quarterback. That's definitely in CJ Carr's DNA. What I kind of took from it is CJ Carr is developing faster than someone his age usually does in terms of the understanding of the X's and O's. But I think how this can overall benefit him is, one, you see a lot of quarterbacks get into the NFL and struggle because they have to go under center. Mm-hmm. But defenses are so good in advance that you have to go under center in the NFL, because what that unlocks in an offense is the ability to obviously go hard play fake, but you put a defense in a much more bind and play action pass concepts. And two, when you're under center compared to shotgun, it limits what you can do just based off of formation. Like defenses oftentimes can eliminate, okay, they're in shotgun and offset here. They're really only going to do a handful of things. But when you're under center with the running back straight behind you, you just have so many more options. And so I think this is something that's going to help CJ Carr tremendously. I think it'll help the offense on Notre Dame become less predictable, and then also prepare him for the NFL when he'll have to go under center at some point.
And the other thing, I'm glad you didn't say this, but I think that the other area that it potentially helps them, where did they struggle last year? Third and short and red zone.
Yeah.
And I think that
you have the whole field, both sides to operate on.
That's exactly right. And I think that if he's more comfortable doing stuff under center, it just, I think it opens up, as you said,
a little teaser for the short down situation this upcoming season.
Yeah, there you go. I think that it opens up a world of possibilities. And so, like when you talk about a quarterback going from year 1 to year 2, and we heard all the comments from Gino Guidugli in the first hour of the show today, talking about CJ Carr and some of the growth, and Guidugli, we didn't play a specific cut because we only had so much time, but he's the one who talked about CJ looking at these different NFL guys. And I think that, like, those are just some little nuances now that they can work on, and he can, and honestly, that's stuff that he can work on even in the summer just by himself, taking a snap, or even just like holding the ball and that footwork coming away from where the center would be, for those play fakes and whatever it happens to be. So I think that that's just another area that can really help both CJ Carr and the offense as a whole next year. Andre wants to know if Gino G is the most underrated position coach. Gino Guidugli, the most underrated position coach in the country.
I mean, he got a lot out of Riley Leonard, and we've seen CJ Carr probably, ahead of his years a little bit. So is he doing a great job? Of course.
And I mean, Kenny Minchie was part of it the last couple of years as well. He parlayed that into, it's not going to benefit Notre Dame ultimately, but I think his ability, at the very least, helped push CJ Carr during a competition, and it bode well for Minchie in the long term. He was able to go to Tennessee and got himself a nice big deal to go to Tennessee. And as we've talked about before, Steve Angeli turned himself into a starting quarterback at Syracuse. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unsung assistant coaches in college football because there's
a lot of them in general.
Yeah, I think really this is kind of what we've been waiting for, is to see the development of this guy. Now, again, if we're going to be fair about this, you do have to, as we've talked about, the fact that CJ Carr comes from a football family, at a high level, both a college quarterback and a national championship winning grandfather, so you do have to factor that into it as well. But again, like when you look at the development of other guys in the rooms, there's no doubting it. And we really didn't get to see it until last year because of the fact that you had the transfer quarterbacks coming in. Fill in the blank. Former Notre Dame and All-Pro Colts offensive lineman Quentin Nelson showing up at Notre Dame's pro day and practice this week is blank.
I thought about this one for a long time. To me, this is the ultimate flex when you can have an ex-NFL lineman come to practice, show you some techniques. I mean, if you're a Notre Dame offensive lineman or a Notre Dame offensive line recruit and you got all pros showing up to practice, taking time out of their schedule to show up, it's just such a flex for Notre Dame, because not only are your players getting that exposure to knowledge and skill of the NFL level, but then also it's a reminder that Notre Dame is the place to go if you want to become a high-end offensive lineman in the NFL. Quentin Nelson is just one of a proven track record that Notre Dame's had, really over the last decade, maybe even two decades. So it's just a big flex, in my opinion.
No, you're right. Because, I mean, like, you think about it, he shows up at pro day. Not only is it cool for a guy like Quentin Nelson, who's down the road at Indianapolis, to show up at Notre Dame's pro day, but it's also, there are a lot of professional execs and coaches there, and I think that they take note of that as well. It's like, oh, Quentin Nelson. And you start to connect the dots. Oh yeah, there are a lot of really good offensive linemen who've come through here at Notre Dame. And then when he can show up at practice, and you're talking about one of the most physically dominating players on either side of the ball to ever strap it up at Notre Dame, and he's out there giving pointers to your offensive lineman at a program that cranks out offensive linemen. I think you're absolutely right. That's a massive flex for Notre Dame and for Quentin Nelson. I don't know what kind of stuff is going on in the chat right now. So there's random things that I see, like responses and questions that I see popping up. I must not be paying attention. Robin says they're from Denton, Texas, just up north of here. I think that's where University of North Texas is, right, Robin? If I'm not mistaken. They said they'll be in section 208, first row. I will look. Can't guarantee. I saw a guy named Chase, who's an Irish Breakdown listener in Columbus last weekend. He said hi, aspiring young broadcaster. So that was cool. So we'll see who we see here. Robert says, I thought you were an old Karate Kid movie. I see. This is like, what does this mean? Where did this come from? You saying I'm Ralph Macchio? Like what? Yep. Denton, North Texas. All right. Let's take a timeout. When we come back, you'll hear from Hannah Hidalgo. Got some stuff from her. We've got March Madness, of course, continuing this weekend. We've got a lot more topics still to cover before we wrap up the show here in a little bit, along with Jesse Stiers, Sean Stiers. It's Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat, rapid fire with IrishBreakdown.com. We continue with Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com. I'm Sean Stiers along with Jesse Stiers. I'm live in Fort Worth, Texas, getting ready for Friday's Notre Dame women's basketball Sweet 16 game. 2:30 Eastern time tip-off. We'll be on the air at 2:15 with pregame show on the Notre Dame radio network, including Sports Radio WSBT. So, of course, it is Notre Dame and Vanderbilt in the Sweet 16. And after Monday's win earlier this week over Ohio State, Hannah Hidalgo was asked if she has embraced the notion of being, quote, the villain when she's on the court away from Purcell Pavilion. And here's what Hidalgo had to say.
I'm not a villain.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I try not to be the villain, but it's fun. I think these moments they're great to be able to play in front of big crowds like this. And it's so much better, of course, playing at home in front of our fans because they feed us. But even playing in front of the Ohio State fans, they were extremely loud. They came and they showed out for, their team. So just to be able to do it on somebody else's floor, we've come a long way from playing away. Like, we really struggle with away games. So now we've been able to figure out how to play in front of other people's fans and just being able to maintain that run and silence the noise.
I mean, it's a good point about the away games. They were just 7-6 in true road games this season. But obviously one of the one that put them over the top above 500 was a big win at Louisville to cap off the regular season, which, helps where they are right now, even being a number 6 seed. So what do you think about that, Jesse? The reporter asked her about being the villain. She says she's not a villain. How do you think she's sort of perceived? Maybe it's hard for us to determine. How do you think she's perceived externally?
Yeah, I don't think that she's perceived as a villain. I think externally she's perceived as pesky, and potentially if you're on the other team, you're more than likely like, man, this girl's annoying because she is constantly just trying to steal the ball. She never stops moving. Every time that she gets a steal, I know that the game plan and a big emphasis is don't let Hannah steal the ball from you. Mm-hmm. And every time she finds a way to steal the ball to get in that blind spot of the offensive player. So I think she's just pesky. I don't think it's being a villain. I don't think she's mean. I don't think, she's out there, trying to take people's hearts, but I don't think she cares about.
I do. I think she's trying to take people's hearts, but
I just think that she's super super resilient and pesky. She's just never going to stop. The motor is always there.
Yeah, I mean, she's so interesting because there is a different on-court persona that she has compared to the one like off the court. She is very, quiet for the most part and, relatively soft-spoken, but step on that court and the switch flips, and it definitely goes to another level. And I think that, if you're going to talk villains specifically, the stuff that probably gets people the most is, when she starts, doing the flexes after a big shot or, thumping her chest and those kind of things. Those kind of very visible displays of emotion are things that, if you're an opposing fan, that can rankle your feathers a little bit. But at the same time, being in the arenas where she is playing in these road games or, in some cases, neutral sites and whatever else, where it's not a home-friendly crowd, it's a little bit like, have you seen Rocky IV? When he goes to Russia and he fights Drago and that whole thing?
Yep.
Like at the end, obviously they played it up quite a bit, but it's like, if I can change, you can change. We all can. It's like, the Russian people get up and they're actually, cheering for Rocky Balboa at the end. Now, I don't think that actually would have happened. And you don't see them, like fans literally get up, opposing fans literally get up and start cheering for Hannah Hidalgo. But you can feel at times, because of the things that she does and the kind of things that she does that other people don't do, you just don't see from very many other players in the country, whether it's steals or scoring and the drives to the baskets and, like the falling out of bounds layup and whatever, you just don't see that from everybody. And I do think that those fans, even though they're pulling for their team, I do think they do, have a different level of appreciation for Hannah Hidalgo than they do for a lot of other players.
Yeah, I think it's respectable for one because she backs up everything that her game backs up completely everything that she does. And two, what you're talking about at the end of the day, game respects game, or ball respects ball. It's like when you get robbed of hitting a home run, you just tip your cap and say, man, that was just a really nice play.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do. But that's a lot of what Hannah does. Like, Hannah does a lot of things where I think some people are a little bit skeptical or doubtful because of her size and everything else. And I mean, man, sometimes her shot is like a moon ball. Sometimes it gets up there. It's a little unconventional, but when you see it and you see her put together, 20 points, 10 rebounds, 5 steals, it's like, how can you say anything? What can you say? She's proven you, right and what she can do. And especially when Notre Dame wins the game, because that's the reason why Notre Dame wins games because of Hannah Hidalgo.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I think that, there are times when some of the stuff rankles different feathers. And, I've seen, you try to separate like real life from online, like I've seen stuff where, people have said, like I'm trying to remember exactly how she put, basically like demoralizing opposing players or, like denigrate, like those kind of things. It's like, look, her job is to win basketball games. Her job is not to worry about the feelings of players on the other teams, and like it's basketball, it's sports. Yeah, there are times when you start seeing some John back and forth. And when she gets that emotion going, you're going to see a little bit, more of that kind of stuff. But again, she backs it up, and at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to, I think. Okay, men's basketball in a lot different situation right now. Fill in the blank. Friend of the show, Tom Noy from the South Bend Tribune, wrote a piece yesterday, and he says that after 3 Notre Dame men's basketball players have already entered the transfer portal this week, Marcus Burton, Jalen Harrelson, and Cole Serta are all expected to also enter the portal very soon as well. It would be blank if that happens.
It would be catastrophically embarrassing if that happens for Notre Dame men's basketball. And the main reason I say that is because Notre Dame men's basketball is Notre Dame men's basketball, but they're acting like they're a mid-major basketball team like the Toledo Rockets. And I bet the Toledo Rockets are even, divvying out a little bit more coin than what Notre Dame is at the end of the day. So it would be worse. And I think I said this earlier. It would be worse than when Bray left. This would be worse than when Shrewsbury came his first year and had 2 scholarship players or whatever it is. You can get mad at Shrewsbury all you want. They should have been better in some in-game situations this season.
Right.
But you're not getting the support. And I'll even go out and say, I don't even think Shrewsbury would have left Penn State had he known that this is the backing that he would have after season 3.
I don't disagree with that. And I think it would be, look, when you've been sub 500 for 3 years and you're also a program that, according to Tom's reporting, is not investing similar money into the program and into players and roster retention specifically, not just roster retention, but, roster acquisitions. There's like a particular player that he doesn't even mention in the article that he and I talked about the other day that, wanted to come here, but his starting point, in terms of what this player wanted to come to Notre Dame was basically Notre Dame's entire budget, and so it was a very easy decision to go someplace else. But the combination of losing games and also not being willing to step up and spend the money to retain the roster and to acquire players, like it's expected that you're going to leave because like Marcus Burton does not have a certain NBA future. And in fact, I think it's like 50-50 at best that he ends up even being a two-way player in terms of the NBA. And so Marcus Burton needs to get the money that he can right now. And, you know, so we're talking about Cole Serta, Jalen Harrelson as well. None of these guys are guaranteed a professional future, you know, in terms of playing basketball. And so if they're losing games at Notre Dame and they're also not getting the kind of money that players of their caliber are getting at other Power 4 programs, why would you stick around? You know?
Yeah, you're not getting the NBA exposure that you would like because you're not performing on a team at a that's playing at a high level, and you're not being compensated at the level that players of your similar skill set are getting elsewhere.
And look, you can't. I'm not going to give Micah Shrewsbury a complete pass and just say, well, the administration has to invest more in this. I do believe the administration has to invest more into it because it's the age old. You've got to spend money to make money. Because we were talking the other day about as a men's basketball program, you make the NCAA tournament. Every game you win, you get another monetary unit, you know, from the NCAA and the revenue pool. So like, you know, you get in the tournament, that's a starting point. You win a couple of games, you win at least one game. You're like, that's a chance to at least make a big chunk of your money back right there, but you're never going to get there if you're not willing to invest money in it to begin with. And you look at a place like Nebraska right now, where Fred Hoiberg is, you know, like they'll be on tonight, they'll play Iowa, but are you going to tell me that, you know, that their roster is that much better off than Notre Dame men's basketball's roster was this year? And by all reports, they're not spending very much more money than Notre Dame is, you know, so there is a developmental aspect that goes along with this. And we haven't seen, you know, a lot of development from this program in the 3 years, or specific players from this program in the 3 years. So this comes from both sides. Shrewsbury has to coach better, and the school also has to put more money into it if they expect to get anything out of it. You know, like you're not even going to get attendance if you're not even putting a competitive team out there on the floor.
It's all bad right now.
Yeah. That's exactly right. There's just no way around it. Okay. We do have Sweet 16 coming up tonight.
I got a big upset.
Oh, what's your big upset?
St. John's victory.
You're taking the Johnnies over Duke, huh?
I am.
What's the money line on that?
I think it's like right around plus 240.
Okay.
The spread's like 5.5. I think they'll definitely. I have a little bit of like a little upset ticket for the weekend. It's got Notre Dame women's basketball, St. John's over Duke, and Arkansas over Arizona. So we'll see. I'm an upset-driven kind of guy.
All right. I like it. I like the confidence. These were the broadcast teams for the first weekend of men's March Madness. You had Ian Eagle, Bill Raftery, Grant Hill. That's the number one group. Kevin Harlan, Robbie Hummel, Stan Van Gundy, Brian Anderson, who was replaced by Jason Benetti in the first four and for the rest of the weekend because of Anderson's voice, along with Jim Jackson, Tom McCarthy, Dan Bonner, Candace Parker, Spiro Ditas, Jim Sparnarkle, Brad Nessler, Wally Zerbiak, Brandon Gaudin, and Chris Weber, and then James Catalan and Steve Lapis. So, favorite, least favorite, underrated. What did you think of the announcer groups last weekend?
So, I have to say least favorite, and this is hard. This is really hard because I like Kevin Harlan, but I hated Stan Van Gundy during that Kansas and St. John's game.
Not in on the Stan Van. That knocks him down to your least favorite just because of Stan Van Gundy? Really?
Yeah, I did not like it. I thought, some of my underrated crews, I really enjoyed Spiro and Jim Sparnakel, and I really liked Brad Nessler and Wally Serbiak this go around as well. I thought both of those groups were a little bit underrated. And favorite, I just have to go with the old classic Ian Eagle, Bill Raftery, and Grant Hill. There's just sometimes you don't play with your food, like we're not messing around here. The best is the best. It's the cream of the crop. But I still think that some of those other crews, like I said, a little bit underrated. And I'm not usually a Wally Serbiak fan, but I thought he did well this tournament.
Yeah, I thought it was good. There have been times, where Nestler has been a little bit sleepy, but the games that I heard him call, I thought were good. I'm not a Spiro fan. I'm not a Spiro
I knew
fan.
you weren't a Spiro fan.
No, I'm not a Spiro fan. When there's a Spiro game on, I'm sorry, I've got to change channels and watch something else. I know a lot of people are high on him. I'm just not a Spiro Ditas fan. Spinarkle is okay. I just cannot get into the Spiro group. I'm a Harlan guy. I like Robbie Hummel, and I didn't really notice until this weekend when I saw some people on social media talking about it. He really does sound like Jay Billis. Like when you listen to their voices.
That's what it is. I'm glad that you finally said something, because there are times where I'm like, is this Jay Billis? But I know Jay Billis isn't around, and this is who it is.
Yeah. They don't need Stan Van Gundy, and I'm not like anti-Van Gundy probably as much as you.
Don't need
but
him.
You could just go with Harlan and Hummel, and it would be fine, I think.
Van Gundy is just so out of touch, and he wants everything to be under his kind of lens of basketball. And it's like, dude, I don't care. You've been around the NBA forever. You don't have a job. There's a reason why you're in the booth. No one wants you as a head coaching job. So just tell us the game, how it's being played, not how you see it through, your lens of basketball. That's what annoys me about him.
Yeah. The Eagle Raftery Grant Hill pairing is good. I mean, it's their number one group for a reason. To me, Raft really makes it, and the guy's like 83 and counting, and there doesn't seem to be any let up. But I still put the Harlan, because I'll always be a Harlan guy. My underrated group is the Tom McCarthy, Dan Bonner, Candace Parker. She was gone at the end of the weekend, and I actually thought it was better when it was just McCarthy and Bonner. And I think you could say that about a lot of these groups. Like, you don't need the third guy. Like, I don't understand why CBS keeps or third person, I guess I should say, because we're talking about Candace Parker. It's like nothing against her. I just feel like McCarthy is the Philadelphia Phillies TV guy. And I like his tonal quality. I think he does a good job calling the game. And Dan Bonner used to be with Harlan, and they moved him, they moved Hummel up and they moved Bonner to McCarthy. So I thought that was my underrated group. They did a lot of, and we'll see it again tonight, where CBS, Turner, whoever, they interviewed a lot of players for their in-game interviews instead of coaches. What do you think about this move? Because
I liked the players
really this year. Did you?
I liked the players because I felt like you actually got something out of it. And I mean, let's just be straight. These are high leverage games, and these coaches oftentimes are just stressed. They don't want to give answers. They're being very short. I felt like the players were definitely more willing to give answers and actually kind of talk about what was going on. It's probably not going to be as quality as what a coach would give you, but I like the kind of less serious, it's just not as intense. Every time a coach comes over, it's like it doesn't feel like they want to be a part of it. I never felt like any of the
coaches
players
never want to be a part of it.
Yeah, but I never got that feeling from the players.
No, exactly. Exactly. And I think that's why it works ultimately, because there is a different kind of willingness from the players that the coaches just want to do their job. And I can completely understand that. They want no part of an in-game interview. So now the players were willing. Answers are always going to be better than others. Questions are always going to be better than others. But I did feel like it was I don't remember them doing that as much in past years as they did this year. So I thought it was a nice little spin, doing something different this time around. Renee says that people need to take. I like how Renee, even when he's calling me by my right name, he's still spelling it wrong.
Hey, it's the thought that counts.
He started off calling me Frank, and now he's calling me Sean, S-H-A-W-N. Everyone knows it's S-E-A-N, but that's okay, because Renee is hopefully, if you're out there working tomorrow afternoon, Frank, we've got another good one when Notre Dame takes on Vanderbilt tomorrow. Well, that is going to do it for today. Jesse and Vince will be here tomorrow afternoon, because I'll be calling a Notre Dame women's basketball game.
That's what you think.
Sweet 16. Maybe it'll be Henry. Henry will just jump in. Or maybe producer Ty we'll just jump in.
I think
Thanks
that's what we need.
Thanks to producer Ty for shoring things up as always back at the other end when we're out here on the road. Thank you very much, Robert and Robin and everyone else. Sean, as Tamiza says.
That's DK. Just call him DK.
Okay. We will wrap it up with that. We will talk to you at some point. Jesse and Vince will talk to you tomorrow. I might be here as well. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.